You're standing around a fire. It's 50,000 BC. The sun just went down. There's no phone, no Netflix, no Wi-Fi, no group chat drama. Just you, the flames, the darkness, and a cloud of smoke attacking your face like it has personal beef with you. And somewhere, at some point in human history, one of our ancestors looked at that smoke and thought, wait a minute, what if I did that on purpose? And that right there may have been the beginning of one of the oldest habits in human history. Not cigarettes, not cigars, not your uncle outside the family cookout saying, I'm just stepping out real quick. No, we're talking about the very first time a human intentionally inhaled smoke from a burning plant. And here's the crazy part. Smoking did not begin with tobacco. It may have begun with fire itself. Before humans had cities, farms, money, laws, or annoying subscription services, they had fire. And fire was everything. Fire cooked food. Fire kept people warm. Fire scared away predators. Fire made the night survivable. Basically, fire was the original life hack. But fire also made smoke. And for hundreds of thousands of years, humans and our earlier ancestors breathed that smoke every single day. The oldest strong evidence for controlled fire goes back roughly 1 million years at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists found burned plant ash and charred bone inside the cave, suggesting early humans were using fire deliberately. And this was long before modern humans even existed. This was probably Homo erectus sitting near those flames. An earlier human species with a smaller brain, a heavier brow, and the facial expression of somebody who definitely did not want to hear your opinion. They cooked. They stayed warm. They gathered in the dark, and they breathed smoke. At first, nobody was trying to smoke anything. It was just part of life. Like dust, bug bites, and wondering if that noise outside the cave was dinner, or something that thought you were dinner. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Not all smoke is the same. When different plants burn, they release different chemicals. Some plants release compounds that affect the brain. They can change mood. They can change pain. They can change perception. They can change how relaxed or alert someone feels. So imagine this. A group of ancient humans are sitting around a fire. Someone tosses the wrong plant into the flames. The smoke changes. Everyone breathes it in. And suddenly, they feel different. Maybe calmer. Maybe lighter. Maybe happier. Maybe they start staring at the stars like, bro, what if the sky is just a giant ceiling? And listen, they had no science, no chemistry, no lab coats, no guy with a clipboard saying, interesting neurological response. But they had something just as powerful. They had pattern recognition. They could notice, burn this plant, feel different. That might be how intentional smoking began, not as a business, not as a product, not as a cigarette habit, but as an accident. And honestly, a lot of human history is just somebody making a weird mistake and everyone else going, wait, do that again. Early humans were experts at noticing patterns because their lives depended on it. They learned which berries were safe, which tracks meant danger, which plants healed wounds, which animals to avoid, and which smoke made everybody sit around the fire acting a little too philosophical. So if a burning plant changed the way they felt, they would have noticed. And eventually, someone would have tried to recreate it on purpose. That might be the real beginning of smoking. Now let's jump forward because this is where archaeology walks into the room and says, actually, I brought receipts. One of the earliest direct examples of intentional cannabis use comes from the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, around 500 BC. Archaeologists found wooden braziers, heated stones, and cannabis residue in a burial site. And not just any cannabis. This cannabis had unusually high THC levels. In other words, ancient people were not accidentally burning the weak stuff. They knew what they were doing. This was not casual. This was ritual. People were burning cannabis and inhaling the smoke as part of a ceremonial practice. And this matches what the Greek historian Herodotus described in the 5th century BC. He wrote about the Scythians, a nomadic people from the Eurasian steppe, placing hemp seeds on hot stones inside enclosed tents. They inhaled the smoke. And according to him, they reacted with pleasure, which is ancient historian language for, these people were having an excellent evening. For a long time, people thought Herodotus was exaggerating, because ancient historians sometimes wrote things like, and then the monster had 3 heads and everyone clapped. But then archaeology found braziers, heated stones, and hemp residue, exactly like he described. So Herodotus was not making it up. The Scythians really were hotboxing ancient tents. History is incredible. But cannabis is only one part of the story. When most people think of smoking, they think of tobacco. Tobacco comes from the nicotiana plant, and it is native to the Americas. That means tobacco was completely unknown in Europe, Africa, and Asia until Europeans made contact with the Americas in the late 1400s. When Columbus arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, his crew saw indigenous people inhaling smoke from burning dried leaves, and the Europeans were confused. Why are they breathing the leaf fire? Then, naturally, they tried it themselves. Because of course they did. Humans see someone doing something strange and immediately go, is this safe? No? Cool, hand it here. But tobacco use in the Americas was already ancient by then. Chemical traces in ancient pipes show tobacco use in North America goes back at least 3,500 years. And a discovery in Utah pushed the possible timeline even further. At a site in the Great Salt Lake Desert, researchers found wild tobacco seeds in a hearth dating back around 12,000 years. That does not prove people were smoking tobacco exactly like later cultures did, but it strongly suggests humans were deliberately using tobacco near fire far earlier than once believed. And that raises a huge question. If people in North America were using tobacco around fires 12,000 years ago, what were people everywhere else doing with their local plants? Because humans were all over the planet. Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia, the Americas. Different places had different plants. Some healed, some poisoned, some relaxed, some stimulated. Some probably made someone say, I can hear colors. And ancient humans absolutely experimented, because humans have always been curious, sometimes brilliant, sometimes reckless, usually both. And that brings us to a bigger idea. Humans seem to have a deep desire to alter consciousness. Across nearly every culture ever studied, people found ways to change the mind. They drank fermented liquids, they ate mushrooms, they chewed leaves, they brewed roots, they inhaled smoke, they danced, they fasted, they chanted, they beat drums for hours. Basically, before clubs existed, humans invented the prehistoric version. Fire, rhythm, smoke, and somebody in the corner seeing ancestors. This was not just entertainment. It was ritual. It was healing. It was bonding. It was survival. For early humans, altered states may have had deep meaning. A vision could be seen as a message. A strange dream could be contact with ancestors. A healing herb could become sacred. A shared smoke ritual could make a group feel united. And that matters because ancient smoking was usually not casual. Nobody was standing outside a cave saying, "Man, work has been crazy lately." Smoking was tied to ceremony, medicine, spirituality, and community. In many indigenous American cultures, tobacco was sacred. It was used in healing rituals, in prayer, in diplomacy, in communication with the spirit world. Smoke was seen as a carrier, something that could lift prayers upward, something that could connect humans with unseen forces. A shaman smoking tobacco was not just relaxing. He was performing a spiritual act. That is completely different from modern cigarettes. Ancient smoke was controlled, symbolic, and meaningful. Modern smoking became commercial, addictive, and mass-produced. And that's where the story gets darker. When tobacco reached Europe after 1492, it spread fast, very fast. By the 1500s and 1600s, tobacco had become a global trade product. Europeans turned it into a habit, a fashion, a business, and eventually, an empire. By the 1800s, cigars and pipes were everywhere. By the 1900s, cigarettes became cheap, easy to produce, and extremely profitable. And then came industrial cigarette companies. They took an ancient ritual plant and turned it into a mass-market addiction machine. The sacred became commercial. The ceremonial became disposable. And tobacco companies spent decades hiding or denying the health risks of cigarettes, even as evidence connected smoking to cancer and deadly disease. That is the difference. Ancient people used smoke with caution, ritual, and meaning. Modern industries sold smoke for profit. Same plant family, completely different spirit. But smoking was not only spiritual, it was also medical. Long before modern inhalers, ancient doctors used smoke and vapor as medicine. In ancient Egypt, the Ebers Papyrus, dating to around 1550 BC, described treatments involving inhaled smoke from heated herbs. Now, from a modern perspective, treating lung problems with smoke sounds absolutely insane, like fixing a sunburn with a flamethrower. But the idea itself was not totally ridiculous. The lungs absorb substances quickly. We still use inhaled medicine today. Asthma inhalers, nebulizers, anesthetic gases. Same basic delivery route, just thankfully less burn this mystery leaf and hope. Ancient Indian Ayurvedic medicine also included a practice called dhumapana, sometimes translated as smoke drinking. It involved inhaling medicinal smoke from specific herbs through pipes. This was not casual. It had rules. Different plants, different conditions, different preparations. Across ancient Egypt, India, Greece, China, Mesopotamia, and the Americas, humans repeatedly discovered that smoke could be used as medicine, ritual, and social glue. And that social part is huge. Humans survive in groups. For most of history, being alone was dangerous. A single person could not easily hunt, gather food, defend a camp, raise children, and survive harsh environments alone. Groups mattered. Trust mattered. And shared rituals built trust. When people gather around a fire and breathe the same smoke, hear the same stories, chant the same words, or enter the same altered state, they connect. And that connection had survival value. A smoke circle was not just about smoke. It was about belonging. It was about memory. It was about turning individuals into a group. Basically, it was prehistoric team building. Except instead of awkward office icebreakers, they had fire, drums, and someone named Grug seeing visions. Honestly, way better. So, when did ancient humans start smoking? The honest answer is, we don't know exactly. The oldest physical evidence gives us pieces of the story. Tobacco use may go back around 12,000 years in North America. Cannabis rituals are clearly documented by around 500 BC in Central Asia. Medical smoke appears in ancient civilizations thousands of years ago, but the behavior itself may be much older. Because smoke does not preserve well. Leaves decay, wooden pipes rot, plant fibers disappear, leather pouches vanish. Stone tools can survive for millions of years. A prehistoric bag of dried herbs? Not so much. So the first true smoking event may be lost forever. It may have happened 20,000 years ago, or 50,000 years ago, or even earlier. Maybe it began when early humans accidentally inhaled smoke from a psychoactive plant near a campfire. Maybe it began as medicine. Maybe it began as ritual. Maybe it began with curiosity. Most likely, it began as all of those things. Humans are curious animals. We experiment. We notice. We repeat. We turn accidents into habits, and habits into traditions. That may be the oldest story of smoking. Not addiction at first, not industry, not rebellion, Not looking cool in an old movie, just fire, plants, breath. And a human brain smart enough to notice something changed. Before farms, kingdoms, writing, money, or temples, people were already gathering around flames. They watched the smoke rise, they breathed it in, and eventually they learned that smoke could carry more than heat. It could carry medicine, it could carry visions, it could carry prayers, it could carry memory, it could carry danger. That is why the story of smoking is not just the story of tobacco. It is the story of humans discovering that the natural world could change the inner world. A burning plant could shift the mind. A shared ritual could strengthen a group. A cloud of smoke could become sacred. And thousands of years later, that same ancient behavior would become one of the most profitable and harmful industries in modern history. So next time you smell wood smoke from a campfire, remember this. You are smelling something older than civilization, older than writing, older than cities, maybe older than our species itself. Fire, smoke, breath. For most of human history, that was the center of the world. And somewhere in the deep past, one of our ancestors leaned into the smoke and realized it did something. Then, because humans are humans, they did it again, and probably told everyone else, hey, come smell this weird bush.